I think I would argue in my 30 years at ESPN is the busiest morning I can ever remember. The Baltimore Ravens wasted no time after last night their trade for Maxx Crosby because of a failed physical. This morning, within the last 20 minutes, segueing to Trey Hendrickson, who has agreed to a deal with Baltimore, 4 years, $112 million with incentives. It could be worth up to $120. That was from Schefter just moments ago, who has been working feverishly. Again, just Adam Schefter, so you know, this is a man who spoke to Neil Elitrash at 5 o'clock this morning and has been working nonstop ever since. So, Schefter, take us through it here. For those who are just joining us here, the Ravens have been awfully busy with what they did last night and what they do now this morning.
Well, listen, they actually had conversations with Trey Hendrickson about teaming him with Maxx Crosby. And when the conversation first started, Trey Hendrickson was of the mind that he would be in Baltimore if that's the offer that he would wound up taking with Maxx Crosby. But alas, that didn't happen. Maxx Crosby was in Baltimore on Tuesday, went through a physical, did not pass the physical. There were images that were sent out to other doctors. Multiple doctors reviewed those images, including the Cowboys team doctor, Dr. Cooper. And in the end, with whatever information they had, the Baltimore Ravens felt like they were uncomfortable moving forward with the physical. Maxx Crosby had been on crutches until 1 week ago. He had surgery 2 months ago on his meniscus. Dr. Elitrash talked about his meniscus, his cartilage, his bone, and that Maxx Crosby is on schedule. But the problem is where that is today is not where the Ravens felt like they needed him to be to pass that physical. And so this was the issue. The Ravens didn't feel comfortable moving forward on the deal, considering that it involved 2 first-round draft picks. They voided the deal. Maxx Crosby goes back to the Raiders. The Raiders are listening to other teams' call, but the plan right now is to at least hold on to him while they listen to offers from other teams.
So Mike Tannenbaum jumps in with us here as well. Mike T, you were a general manager in 2 different places. You obviously were involved in countless trades. This is always a piece of it. So there are people who are going to look at this. I want to make it 1,000% clear that no one on Get Up is suggesting that anyone did anything untoward here. The physicals are always a part of these deals. But there are people who are watching this, and you know what happens on the internet. People start to, oh my goodness, they backed out of it because they saw Trey Hendrickson was going to be cheaper than they thought, or whatever the case may be. Take us through how these processes actually work behind the scenes, how the sausage gets made, Mike T.
Yeah, Greeny. So again, a trade is a contract between Team A and Team B that has to be approved by the league office at 4 o'clock today. Typically, in that trade papers are conditions. The player reports and passes a physical. A physical is very subjective, and some teams will pass, a player, and other teams won't. It's going to candidly happen at the combine every year, where you'll see teams pass on certain players. The most famous example was Drew Brees. He failed the physical of the Miami Dolphins when Nick Saban was the head coach and went on to a Hall of Fame career with the Saints. So with that said, there is another team or two today that could make a trade with the Raiders for Maxx Crosby. And here's another interesting layer. You can put like different conditions in a trade. So for example, let's say they trade to the Bills for a 2nd round pick this year and a 2nd round pick in 2027. And if Maxx Crosby plays 70% or more of the snaps in 26, the 27 2nd round pick becomes a 1st round pick. So there's ways you could work around this situation if you have a team that's willing to assume some of the risk.
Let me ask you a few more questions here. We'll fly through them quickly. The idea that all of these deals, literally everything we have heard Schefter and others report, starting on Monday at noon, all of these things are not official until 4 o'clock today. So we understand that almost any of them are fungible and teams or players could change their mind. But how unethical, or how would that be received within league circles if you as a team all of a sudden decided to change your mind based on the change in this process? Is that something that is just verboten as far as the ethics of the business are concerned?
Absolutely. It's rare and it's disappointing when it happens. It candidly happened to us once at the Jets. You never forget the agent. You never forget the team that did it to you. So it is rare. It could happen because, again, until 4 o'clock, all bets are off.
Okay, and then the final one would be if you're the Raiders now and you have the player back and you have already traded him and he has made it fairly clear that he wants out of there and you're trying to, you want to maximize him as an asset, whether it's as a player or trading him. If you're John Spytek now and the group in Las Vegas, how are you proceeding?
with a tremendous sense of urgency. And here's why, Greeny. I heard Adam say earlier about, Micah Parsons went all the way into the summer. Here's why this is different. Maxx Crosby has $30 million cash, $35 million their cap. And that's a massive swing if he's there or not. And obviously the draft choices, Greeny, you're running the draft for ESPN. So you know that, hey, there may be a player or two that we could get in the draft, depending on where this pick may or may not be, and it materially impacts your planning. Therefore, if I could get a 2 this year and a 2 next year that goes to a 1, I'm cutting my losses, so to speak, if I'm the Raiders, because I want certainty, and I need to know what I have to operate going into the offseason.
Okay, outstanding. Mike, stay with me close. Nick, go.
I think it's important that for the common fan, we make it clear that we use the word pass or fail the physical as if it's something that's definite, like you hit a switch on or off. Like teams choose whether a player passes or fails a physical based on the conditions.
Right.
So for 2 first-round picks, he fails the physical for the Ravens. For another situation, for another team, for a different compensation, for a different situation, right, you then could pass the physical. So I'm saying that to say, as the circumstances change, what line you mark for where he has to be physically to pass a physical, that changes for all these teams. And so wherever he ends up now, the impact that he could have, we're not sure, but it still could be as high as we expect it to be for the Ravens. Like the Ravens might still think he's really impactful, but thought that for 2 first-round picks, maybe it wasn't worth it for the long-term cost.
Wait, you're saying the Ravens could entertain trying to trade for him again for a lesser value?
No, I mean, technically they
could. Or like the
but
Buffalo Bills could.
I assume that the Ravens are out because the Raiders are pissed at them and they wouldn't talk to them.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I'm saying that other teams that were not in the conversation before, now the conversation comes down. And whether Maxx Crosby is an every down, all-season dominant player like he was before or not matters less, because what most of these teams want is Maxx Crosby to kill in the playoffs, which I think even the Ravens, I would think, would believe that he could do that if you make it to the playoffs and he's healthy.
It's also $30 million a year over the next 2 years. It's going to be fully guaranteed. So that factors in, too, when you talk about the price to acquire the player.
I think what Mike T said, I was fascinated by, because he was referencing the creativity of a contract, at least potentially, and saying, if I'm Philadelphia, I think Philadelphia should be on the phone right now with Las Vegas. I'll be very clear. If you're Philadelphia, Howie Roseman, you have always been great at capitalizing on decreased value in the marketplace.
Finding a weakness,
right?
and
Saquon coming off a bad year, all that. Jalen Carter drops in the draft. So if I'm Philly, I was interested in saying, like, okay, if you're Philly, call the Raiders. And to Mike T's point, we'll give you a 1 next year and a 2 this year if he makes X% of plays or plays the X amount of snaps. I found that very interesting just from a viewership perspective.
Go ahead, Mike.
Greeny, ironically, when we traded for Brett Favre with the Jets from the Packers, we actually had different conditions on the draft choice because we were getting him late. He was obviously a Hall of Fame quarterback. It could have gone all the way up to a first-round pick, depending on how much he played and team success. So, again, it doesn't happen often, but in a situation like this, it could fix a problem where John Spytek, the GM of the Raiders, gets on the phone with Buffalo, Chicago, even Tampa Bay, and says, hey, we need something this year, and we need a 1 next year if he's Maxx Crosby. And I think that is a fair resolution given the circumstances.
And the value, I think, is hard for us to predict what happens to his value as the season goes along. Understand that the Raiders will have an impact on their cap this year and the amount of cash that they have to put up. But if the season goes along and there are injuries or there are teams that are close that feel like they just need something to get over the hump, like while I think immediately Maxx Crosby's value goes down, if you are a team that thinks you're super close and you're like, we're right there, Maxx Crosby is healthy, he's been resting for much of the season for the Raiders, right now, before the trade deadline, I'll give you a first-round pick in next year's super impressive draft to go ahead and bring him over and impact our team.
It's safe to assume the Raiders are the ones who are just on the short end of the stick here. Accurate?
For the moment.
I mean, the Ravens,
right
I feel, settle into a decent place. The Raiders right now, there's nothing that they can do.
I mean, they could still trade it.
They're going to try and trade
It's
it.
a question of what the price is.
In relation specific to the situation.
And by the way, they can still fit him under their cap, even with all these other deals they agreed to a couple of days ago. So, I mean, it might work out fine if he's healthy and plays well for the Raiders. They make them even better.
Go ahead, Shefty, finish it up.
Yeah, they're back to where now there's a sense that some teams would have to take a look at him medically. And even his own surgeon, who operated on the knee 2 months ago, says that the time for a physical that would be better to do, it would be a couple of months from now, when he's healthier, when he's closer to being back to action. And so the Raiders could opt to trade him and they likely will. Now, at some point, the price on the compensation will drop, and it'll get to a certain point where even teams that wouldn't have gone there for the money and the picks, you kind of meet a common ground to where it works. Like all of a sudden, the Philadelphia Eagles weren't in, but now they are. The Buffalo Bills weren't in, but now they are. You see if it gets to a certain spot where all of a sudden it brings in other teams that did not have interest. That's what's going to happen down the line here at some point.
And I will remind everyone that the draft, I'm just throwing this out there, the draft everyone wants a part of is the 27 draft.
Point, yeah.
For whatever that's worth. That's the draft
Correct.
everyone wants to be in, is next year's draft. So all of this will continue, and we work our way forward. But on a day filled with ridiculous news from the NFL and ridiculous